Welcome back. Did Poussin's investigation, his conversation with Lucian, actually identify a potential candidate location that fits all these criteria?
Yeah, it did. After cross-referencing this detailed mythological profile against geographical and linguistic data, the methodology pointed towards one specific location, the Namunukula mountain range in Sri Lanka.
Namunukula, Sri Lanka. Okay, let's see how it stacks up. How does Poussin validate this match, point by point? Let's start with the most unique, the most specific clue, that ninefold structure.
This is the linchpin, the direct hit. Remember Kunlun's mythical memory of 9 city gates, 9 wells, 9 crooked peaks?
Yes, that persistent number 9.
The name of the Sri Lankan mountain range, Namunukula, in the local Sinhala language, literally translates to 9 peaks.
Wait, the name means 9 peaks?
Exactly. Namunukula, 9 peaks. It's a direct one-to-one linguistic match between the unique numerical detail preserved in the Chinese myth and the actual documented name and topography of this mountain range.
That's not interpretation, that's a translation.
Precisely. For Poussin, this correlation elevates that 9 motif from just a symbolic number in a myth to a geographical coordinate. It anchors the Kunlun memory directly to this specific place.
Okay, that's a very powerful start. What about the other criteria? The profile required an island or a flood-surviving peak.
Well, Namunukula is a major mountain range, one of the highest located in Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka is obviously a prominent high-elevation island in the Indian Ocean. This fits perfectly with the island sanctuary or soul survival peak motif found in the Kunlun survival narrative, and also resonates with the island origin stories of Java and the Khmer.
Checks that box. Next, the fountainhead, the source of the four rivers archetype. Does a mountain range in Sri Lanka fit the idea of being the source of the world's waters?
It fits the archetype perfectly within its context. The Namunukula range itself is the direct headwaters for 2 major Sri Lankan rivers, the Kurung Bnam and Ganga. But more importantly, the entire central highlands region surrounding Namunukula acts as the fountainhead for all of Sri Lanka's major rivers.
Ah, okay. So from the perspective of an island civilization, that central highland is the source of all life-giving water flowing outwards in all directions.
Exactly. It fulfills the cosmological role of the 4 rivers source point for the island world. The archetype fits the local geography's function perfectly.
Makes sense. And the last piece of the mythological profile, the divine guardian. Does local folklore support that?
It does. Poussin found that local folklore and traditions associated specifically with the Namunukula mountain include beliefs about a powerful protective spirit, the guardian deity in Dhaka who watches over the range.
So a local guardian deity.
Yes, matching the archetype of the Kaming in Kunlun, the cherubim in Eden, or Naga Basuki in Bali, the fearsome protector of the sacred site and its fortune.
So on all the major points derived from the mythological profile, island peak, fountainhead guardian, and especially that ninefold structure in Namunukula, seems to be a direct match.
The alignment is remarkably consistent across all the thick lines identified by the tracing paper method, but Poussin didn't just stop with matching the mythological geography.
No. What else?
This is where he pushes the methodology further, applying it to linguistics and political history. He makes a really audacious claim about a key royal title based on the island's indigenous name.
Okay, this sounds interesting. What's the claim?
First, he establishes, using historical sources like the 1815 Canyon Convention, which documented the terms of British takeover, that the indigenous name for the kingdom, for the island entity before colonization, was Sihai. Not Lanka, but Sihai.
Sihai. Okay, a verified historical name. How does that connect?
He connects it to that very influential dynastic title we see across Southeast Asia, particularly among Khmer and Javanese rulers, Śailarāja.
Śailarāja, I know that term. It's Sanskrit, right? Means mountain king, often linked to Meru and divine kingship.
Exactly. It was a hugely important title, conferring immense prestige and legitimacy. Now, here's Poussin's linguistic leap. He posits that this widely adopted Sanskrit title, Śailarāja, is actually a foreign mispronunciation or a deliberate translation of the true original political title.
Don't tell me.
Śailarāja, the king of Sihale.
Wow. So Śailarāja, the mountain king, wasn't just an abstract concept tied to any sacred mountain. Poussin is arguing it was a specific reference to the king of Sihai, the ruler of the island, that contained Namunukula, the 9 peaks.
That's precisely the argument. It reframes the entire mountain king ideology that shaped kingdoms across the region. It wasn't about being king of a mountain. It was about claiming connection, lineage, or legitimacy derived from the historical king of Sihai, the ruler of the island identified as the mythological origin point.
That changes things. It implies that the political and religious aspirations of rulers in places like Cambodia and Java were fundamentally oriented towards claiming a historical link back to Sri Lanka, to Sihile.
It suggests the memory wasn't just mythological, but also geopolitical. Even that Funan title, recorded in Chinese chronicles, Kurung Bnam, which also means mountain king, and was used alongside Śailarāja.
This suddenly points to a specific place, the kingdom of the king of Sihai, not just some generic mountain.
It connects the abstract title directly to a known historical entity and location. This linguistic link, if correct, overlays a political reality onto the mythological map he'd constructed.
Okay, so we have the mythological geography pointing to Namunukula, and now this linguistic argument linking the regional mountain king title directly to the king of Sihai. How does Passan solidify this connection between the myth, the place, and the people?
He uses an ethnographic bridge. He connects the mythical name Kunlun itself directly to descriptions of a specific group of people found in ancient texts, people called the Kurung or Gurung.
Kunlun, the place name, linked to Kurung, the people name. That sounds like a direct linguistic link, too.
It is, and the descriptions of these Kurung people in the source material Passan sites are very telling. Where are they located?
Where?
They're described as barbarous men of the islands of the southern seas. So islanders from the south.
Okay, that fits Sri Lanka's location relative to China. What else?
They're given a distinct physical description, curly-haired and black-bodied.
Right.
But the most compelling detail, the cultural marker, is their noted skill with animals. The texts explicitly state that these Kurung people can tame and cow ferocious beasts, rhinoceroses, elephants.
Elephant tamers from Southern Island.
Exactly, renowned elephant tamers. That description aligns remarkably well with the historical ethnographic profile of ancient Sri Lankans, the inhabitants of Sihile, who were famous throughout the ancient world for their expertise in capturing and training elephants.
So that potentially links the people, Kurung, matching the Sri Lankan profile, with the myth name, Kunlun, and the location, Sihile, Sri Lanka, via the Namunukula Nine Peaks feature. It ties it all together.
It closes the loop, Passan argues. The mountain name, Kunlun Peaks Namunukula, the people associated with the name, Kurungelephant Tamersis Islanders, and the geopolitical entity, Sihile, Sri Lanka, all converge.
But here's the big question Passan raises then. If this unified memory connecting myth, place, people, politics is so robust, so traceable through these different lines of evidence, why isn't it common knowledge? Why isn't Namunukula universally recognized as the potential origin point for these myths?
This is where the thesis takes its most provocative turn. Passan doesn't believe this knowledge was simply lost to time. He argues for deliberate modern obfuscation, a conscious effort to break these connections and erase this specific origin memory.
Deliberate erasure, how would that work?
He traces the culmination of this alleged erasure to a specific, relatively recent political act, the official renaming of the country in the mid-20th century. Specifically, the move in 1948 to formally adopt the name Lanka and sideline the older indigenous name Zimarasapir, Śailarāja, the land of Sihale.
How does changing the name from Śailarāja to Lanka achieve this erasure, according to his argument?
Passan's point is that Śailarāja was a broader, more encompassing term for the land and its associated regions, or dipas. Lanka historically referred to just one specific region within Sihale.
So by renaming the entire nation after just one of its constituent parts.
The argument is that the other ancient dipas that were considered part of the greater Sihale were effectively orphaned from the official national identity. They vanished from the modern political map and consciousness.
And was there one particularly significant dipa that got vanished in this process?
Cosmologically, the most significant one Passan identifies is Jambudvipa.
Jambudvipa. In Buddhist and Hindu cosmology, isn't that the central continent of the world? The landmass surrounding the cosmic Mount Meru, the very center of the Earth.
Precisely. It's the prime real estate in the traditional cosmos. Passan argues that by effectively removing Jambudvipa from the historical identity and geography of the island of Sihale through this renaming act,
its sacred identity as the world center became detached.
Yes, and that detachment, he claims, allowed the sacred identity of Jambudvipa to be conveniently pushed onto the Indian subcontinent, which geologically is an Ardhadipa, a peninsula, not the island continent typically associated with the cosmological center.
So the argument is, rename the island from the encompassing Sihale to the regional Lanka, This orphans the associated Jambudipa, allowing India to claim that central cosmic identity, thereby obscuring Sri Lanka's potential original role as the actual Axis Mundi location remembered in those foundational myths tied to Namunukula.
That's the hypothesis of deliberate obscuration. A political act in the 20th century severed the island's modern identity from its ancient, potentially central cosmological role, completing a long process of forgetting or displacement.
It's a grand, unified theory connecting myth, language, geography, politics, and alleged modern erasure. It covers a huge amount of ground.
It really does. And what's fascinating is how Passan used his own creative work to sort of encapsulate and confirm this entire thesis.
You mean his song?
Yeah, he provided the lyrics to his song Hilayo, which basically functions as a poetic summary of the whole investigation. The title itself, Hilayo, refers to the inhabitants of Śailarāja, the mountain people.
So the lyrics reflect the conclusions.
Directly, they speak of the people as the inheritors of the mountain slopes, clearly identifying them as the survivors who remained on the high ground, like Namunukula.
Does it mention the flood?
Oh, yeah. It directly echoes that firework viewpoint analogy. There's a line about the sea's slow extend, and then the realization that the differing flood memories depend on perspective. What you see depends on where you stand. But on the peak, we saw the sea arrive.
That perfectly captures the Kunlun survival viewpoint being the primary, non-relativistic memory from the actual peak.
And it explicitly references that idea of a lost continent, the greater landmass connected to Sihao. The lyrics call the island the tip of Atalanka's spine, suggesting it's the last remnant of a much larger, now submerged land.
Solidifying the identity of the Hilayo as the mountain people who survived the cataclysm on the remaining high ground.
But then the lyrics make this incredible connection, bringing the Western myth right into the island's identity.
Which is?
The line, Kunkulida Kwinadanu, which translates to Guardians of Adam's Garden.
Whoa. Directly linking the people of Sihao to the Garden of Eden.
Yes. And this brings us to the final piece of microgeography in Passan's thesis. He wasn't content just identifying Sri Lanka or even the Namunukula range as the macro location. He pinpointed the specific spot he believes corresponds to the Garden of Eden itself.
Within the Sri Lankan highlands. Where?
Our place called Horton Plains.
Horton Plains. Why there? How does that spot fit the Eden archetype specifically?
Well, firstly, Horton Plains is a unique high-elevation plateau known for its almost otherworldly climate, its biodiversity, its pristine natural beauty clouds, mist, unique flora. It has that paradise feel.
Okay, atmospherically it fits. What about the specific Eden features like the rivers?
This is key. Remember Eden's river splitting into 4. Horton Plains functions as the crucial headwaters for 3 of Sri Lanka's major rivers, the Mahaweli, the Kilani, and the Wallawe.
3 out of the 4 archetypes.
Exactly. While the myth archetype settled on the symbolic number 4, being the source of 3 of the island's main life-giving rivers from one plateau, is an incredibly strong geographical fit for that fountainhead of life concept. The slight numerical difference is easily explained by millennia of symbolic interpretation.
That's a solid match for the river source. Anything else?
Passan also pointed to local folklore connected to Horton Plains, legends about a sun prince and a moon princess who used to meet there.
Sun prince, moon princess, how does that connect?
He draws a direct parallel to that fundamental divine duality we see in the Kunlun mythology. The king father of the East, Taiti, and more importantly, the queen mother of the West, Showangmu, a primordial male and female pair associated with the sacred origin point.
The queen mother of the West, Juwambu. She's the one with the Peaches of Immortality, right? Guarded by the Kaming on Kunlun.
That's her. And this is where Passan delivers what he sees as the ultimate relativistic confirmation, using her title to prove the viewpoint argument.
How does the title Queen Mother of the West confirm anything geographically?
Think about the geography. If the origin point, the sacred mountain, the source of immortality, the home of this primordial mother goddess figure, is actually Sri Lanka, Siale.
Okay.
Then for the civilizations of China, which lie significantly to the east of Sri Lanka, how would they naturally remember or refer to the direction of that sacred island origin point?
It would be, to their west.
Exactly. The title Queen Mother of the West isn't just symbolic. Passan argues it's a literal directional marker embedded in the myth, an ancient geographical memory reflecting the relative position of the Chinese viewpoint looking westward towards the sacred island source.
So the Chinese myth itself contains proof of its relativistic perspective, pointing west towards Sri Lanka.
That's the interpretation. It transforms the myth from pure symbolism into a kind of directional eyewitness testimony based on geographical reality.
The whole thesis is incredibly coherent, weaving all these threads together. Mythology as fragmented geopolitical history, centered on Namunukula's Śailarāja. But he takes it one step further, doesn't he? Applying this obscuration framework not just to geography and myth, but to spiritual history itself.
Yes, the final extension of the thesis applies the same pattern of memory, location, and deliberate erasure to the origins of Gautama Buddha.
How so?
Passan asserts, based on his sources, that there is historical evidence, primarily inscriptions that have been documented by scholars since at least the 1880s, suggesting a Sri Lankan origin for the Buddha.
A Sri Lankan origin for the Buddha. That contradicts the universally accepted narrative of birth in Lumbini, modern-day Nepal.
Completely. And Passan argues that this evidence for a Sri Lankan origin is actively suppressed, ignored, or dismissed by mainstream historical and particularly monastic consensus, precisely because it challenges that established narrative so fundamentally. He sees it as the ultimate example of the deliberate erasure pattern.
If there's documented evidence like inscriptions, why isn't it widely known or debated? What's the mechanism of suppression he points to?
He refers specifically to the work of a researcher named Jayarathne Pathiraraki, who apparently investigated these inscriptions and related evidence.
And Pathiraraki published this.
Yes, in a work whose title translates to something like Makama, where the southern Buddha's footprint is, and King Ravana's inscriptions. But according to Passan, Pathiraraki faced immense potential backlash for the most explosive claims, particularly the Buddha's local origin.
So how did he get it published?
Passan notes a fascinating tactic allegedly employed by the researcher. He deliberately buried the most controversial findings, the core arguments, and evidence for the Buddha's Sri Lankan origin in the footnotes.
In the footnotes. Why?
As a strategy to bypass the immediate filters of academic and monastic review. By placing the most challenging data in the footnotes, it enters the official scholarly record. It's there for those who look closely. But it doesn't trigger the same level of initial alarm or censorship as it might if it were the central argument of the main text.
So the main text focused on.
Still revolutionary, but perhaps slightly less threatening evidence, like inscriptions attributed to the legendary King Ravana and his family making offerings to the Buddha Sangha, which itself challenges mainstream timelines but doesn't directly relocate the Buddha's origin.
A strategic move, then. Publish the core truth, but hide it in plain sight within the academic apparatus to ensure its survival, while focusing the main discussion on related but less controversial points.
That's the interpretation. It suggests the systematic obscuration Passan hypothesized affects everything. The foundational geography, Jambudipa vanishing, the political memory, Śailarāja becoming Śailarāja, the mythological core, Kunlun Eden's source obscured, and even the foundational spiritual history, Buddha's origin. The thick lines of evidence are there, Passan argues, but they've been deliberately relegated to the faint lines of footnotes and ignored history.
This entire deep dive, stemming from Passan's conversation with Lucien, is just massive in scope. We started comparing mountain myths, Kunlun, and Eden, and ended up with this incredibly detailed, unified theory.
It connects everything. Namunukula's 9 peaks, the linguistic twist of Śailarāja, the ethnographic link to the Kurung people, the alleged political vanishing of Jambudipa, Horton Plains as a potential Eden, the relativistic queen mother of the West, and even the origins of the Buddha.
And it all filters back through that core idea. A single, real-world cataclysmic flood event, remembered differently from various viewpoints, with the original location and its associated history being systematically obscured over time.
The tracing paper method, as a methodology, seems remarkably effective in Passan's application here. It consistently filtered what he identified as mythological noise, the culturally specific forms, like gold versus peaches, from the persistent signal, the 9 peaks, the 4 rivers concept, the terrifying guardian.
It really provides a framework, doesn't it? Not just for analyzing these specific myths, but potentially for rereading any myth as embedded history.
And that's the real takeaway, I think. The audacity of pinning down these vast, sacred, foundational myths, the Axis Mundi, the source of life, the Garden of Eden, the Peaches of Immortality, onto one specific real-world mountain range in Sri Lanka.
And then arguing that its identity was deliberately hidden.
It forces you, the listener, to reconsider how we approach myth entirely. The core lesson here isn't just about whether Namunukula is the place. It's about how memory, especially traumatic memory, like a global flood, and politically potent memory, like an origin point, gets stored, transmitted, translated, and sometimes deliberately managed or suppressed by cultures over millennia.
The faint lines of local bias coexist with the thick lines of shared trauma and core facts.
Exactly. So the really provocative question that lingers, stemming from Poussin's final point about obscuration, is this. If elements we've always considered purely mythological, from Eden to Meru, can be demonstrably layered over a specific, identifiable geographical location with a traceable political history, does that challenge us to read all our foundational stories, even the ones we think are purely symbolic or poetic?
Should we be reading them instead as fragmented geopolitical history? History that's been broken up, scattered, and encoded in myth, just waiting for the right key, the right tracing paper method to unlock it.
It certainly makes you look at every detail, every name, every number in mythology with fresh eyes. Could this be a distorted echo of a real place, a real event, a real political situation?
It's a profound thought to end on. A huge thank you to our listener Poussin for sharing the source material from his deep conversation with the Lucian system. It's given us, and hopefully you, a lot to think about. We've really only scratched the surface of the potential implications here today.